Okay. All right, we're at noon. Pam, are you ready to get going?
I
All
am.
right, cool. We can hop in. I see some people trickling in still, but this will also be, I think, made available online so people can watch it later if they miss the beginning. But hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. My name is Emma Coleman. I am the senior field organizer with our Sierra Club Iowa Beyond Coal campaign based in Des Moines. And I am so excited to be presenting today with Pam, or well, Pam's presenting, I'm just helping, on data centers in Iowa. So we have a great presentation set up. Pam is our lobbyist and chapter director for the Iowa chapter. And we are diving into the legislative session next month. So this is a hot topic, and we wanted to share what we know about it. And I will let Pam take it away.
Thank you, Emma. Let's start out and talk about what is a data center. So a data center is a building that has banks of computers and network equipment that are used to store, process, and manage data and information. Now, you may have heard of cloud computing, artificial intelligence, or AI, e-commerce, and cryptocurrency. And those things all fall into the realm of a data center. Now, the question is, who's building data centers? And there are a number of companies that you probably have heard about, and there's some that you may not have. So Google, Meta and Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple are all building data centers. And then there's some companies that maybe you haven't heard of: Digital Reality, QTS, Equinix, and there are many others. And this is an area that is growing. There are a lot of companies coming in, apparently some on speculation. And so expect to see lots of partners and players in this sphere. Now, currently, Iowa has 105 data centers. They're spread across Iowa, but largely in the larger communities. And on the next slide, we'll show you where those data centers are and how many of them there are. Des Moines has 77 data centers spread across the area. Sioux City has 1. Davenport has 3. Waterloo has 2. Monticello has 2. Cedar Rapids has 4, but that expects to be growing significantly. Greenfield has 1. Council Bluffs has 13. Cedar Falls has 1, and Lake Park has 1. So as you can see, they're concentrated in the large areas. And let's get an idea of how big these data centers are. So some of them take up several thousand acres of land and are millions of square foot in terms of building space. So let's just talk about some of the big ones. Apple in Waukee sits on 2,000 acres of land. Google in Council Bluffs sits on 172 acres and is almost 3 million square feet, 2,890 square feet. There's another Google facility in Council Bluffs that sits on 1,000 acres, and that's 2.9 million square feet. Meta in Altoona sits on 520 acres, and that's 2,740 square feet. So you can see these are huge buildings, and they take up a huge amount of land. On the next screen, we'll show you some more about the scale of the data centers. Microsoft right now in West Des Moines sits 123 acres, and it's expected to grow to 1.8 million square feet. And there's another one, Microsoft in West Des Moines is sitting at 245,000 square feet currently, which means it's going to be growing. So we know that there are more data centers expected, and the media has been covering that on a regular basis. Wisconsin Public Radio reported that Microsoft is planning a 6th data center campus in West Des Moines. The KGN reporter, Kaylee Whitlatch, reported that Google is considering 6 data centers near Palo. Palo is about 12 to 20 miles outside of Cedar Rapids. Kathy Bolton on Business Record reported a number of data centers that are going to be locating in the greater Des Moines area. So one near Van Meter, which is COPT Defense Properties, 365 acres. Edged plans 105,000 square foot data center in Ankeny. There is somebody that hasn't been named yet that's building a data center on 300 acres in Norwalk. And Cologix is thought to be building a data center on 78 acres in Altoona. So they're building small ones, but they're also building very, very large data centers. And I'm sure this is not the end of the list of data centers that are going to be built. So let's, on the next slide, start talking about what our concerns are. One of the big concerns is the electricity needs. With buildings that big and with that many computer pieces of equipment and all of the powering that has to go to those computers, there will be strains put on the existing electrical system, not only the grid, but the ability of the utility companies to provide electricity to the data centers. The current infrastructure may not be able to support those needs, and it will require a build out of transmission lines and power generation. And all of that is expected to affect rates customers pay for electricity, unless we're able to do some special work with tariffs to wall off the electricity needs for the data centers versus regular customers. And we'll talk about that in a future slide. Another concern that we have is about water requirements. Data centers require large quantities of water to cool the computer hardware. The water usage can put huge strains on the aquifers, surface water, and groundwater. Cities and rural water associations might need to build new infrastructure. That includes wells, water towers, and treatment capacity. There's a risk of depleting the aquifers in Iowa. Right now, the state does not have a lot of data on how much water is in the aquifers. And unfortunately, aquifers are very slow to recharge. The water has to seep through layers of ground and through porous places in rocks in order to get to an aquifer. Other customers can be impacted by the rising cost for the infrastructure to support the data centers. Now, some data centers use air cooling and are more efficient, but those data centers use more electricity. So there's a trade-off there. But the end concern is the heavy amount of water that's required to cool the data centers. There's another concern, and that is the speculation surrounding the building of data centers. Some of the data centers are built on speculation. They don't have customers already in place. And so there's a risk of overbuilding the structures and the infrastructure. If the bubble bursts, and if the buildings are not built, or if the buildings are built and then abandoned, the infrastructure that was built around that data center will still have to be paid for. And that means the water infrastructure and the electrical generation and transmission. And it'll have to be paid for by somebody. We are concerned that that will fall on regular customers unless there's ratepayer protection. And again, we'll talk about that at the end of the presentation. There's a concern about the diesel generators. What happens is these data centers need to operate 24 hours a day. If the electricity goes down, then they have diesel generators to provide that backup power. Diesel generators emit harmful pollution. They're noisy. And so those things are a great concern, especially if there are houses near where the data center is built and people who have to breathe the air from the emissions of the data centers. So we have some proposed legislation we've been working on. The first thing is we believe that there needs to be some reporting on water and energy use by data centers. That transparency can be used for planning for future infrastructure. And we want to build where the infrastructure is needed, but we don't want to overbuild. The second thing is that we believe there's a tariff that needs to be put in place for data centers. Now, this would be an electrical tariff. It ensures that the cost of providing electricity to data centers is paid for by the data centers and not borne by residential customers and small businesses. It could mean that they have to pay ahead in an escrow account to ensure that there's money in case they pull the data centers pull out of the area, and it makes sure that there's enough money to cover the infrastructure costs. The third thing is that we need an integrated resource planning that takes into account the electricity demand by data centers. Now, integrated resource planning is done by the utility companies, and they look at the future needs for electricity. They look at what they're able to provide in electricity and how are they going to meet the future needs. And without that planning, the utility companies run a risk of overbuilding or not building enough electrical generation. And finally, we believe there needs to be an interim study of public water systems and the need to build the infrastructure to support the data centers. Now, public water systems could be rural water associations, municipal utilities providing water, and it could be in Iowa, we have a couple of places that have investor-owned water suppliers. And so all three of those need to be looked at in terms of how costs are recovered by building the data centers and making sure that the public is not paying for infrastructure or stranded assets if the data center is not built or if it's abandoned. And on the next slide, we're going to show you what you can do. Now is the time to begin contacting your legislators about this issue. And this slide has web addresses for the state senators, state representatives, and legislators. So if you don't know how to find your legislator, you can go to the legis.iowa.gov/legislators/find, and you can put in your address. Otherwise, those two web pages will tell you how to contact your legislator by email. They also have phone numbers. Now, when you contact your legislators, you can ask them for legislation that requires reporting on water and energy use, creating an electricity tariff, requiring integrated resource planning, and creating an interim study of public water systems and how customers are paying for their water. And with that, I'll entertain questions.
Thanks so much, Pam. So if you have any questions, you can submit them in the Q&A. You can raise your hand. You can drop them in the chat. I think we have the chat enabled now. We were having some like webinar hiccups. We didn't mean to disable the chat. It's very complicated. Too many options these days. So yeah, if you have any questions, I know I had a couple messaged to me, but feel free to raise your hand and we can hopefully answer them for you. I know one of the first ones we had was what can the general public do to help? And Pam already answered that with one right around the corner, engaging in the legislative session. What percentage of data centers are you seeing using air cooling instead of water cooling?
I don't have numbers. Generally, the cryptocurrency data centers are using air cooling. I think there's one near Cedar Rapids that is planning on using air cooling. It's not built yet, but most of them use water cooling. I do want to add, now is the time to begin contacting your legislators. The legislative session starts January 12th, but it doesn't hurt to get your comments in early before the mad rush of the legislative session begins.
Yes, definitely. One thing I'm noticing too and learning is just like the extreme differences between these data centers. Like some of them are, like you said, taking up thousands of acres, which is kind of unfathomable. versus there's several like down on Ingersoll for those of you, I see some folks from Des Moines in here. And from what I know, they're inside like banks and stuff like that. So such a very big breadth of data centers that we're looking at. We had one question come in that is, are there incentives or tax breaks given to data center companies?
In Iowa, there is a sales tax that is given for computer equipment. Last year, or in 2025, the legislature reduced that amount of tax break, but that is definitely something that's available. The local communities can do their own economic development, and I don't know if any of them have for the data centers, but that can be things like tax increment financing, reduced property taxes, and incentives like that for the data centers. You'd have to check your local community, your local county assessor to figure that out.
Thank you, Pam. One other question related, do data centers affect property values?
I don't know the answer to that. That's a good question. And that's something we need to look into.
Yeah, little early to tell. I think it depends on scale, location, lots of different factors. I imagine we'll find out soon.
Yes. Now in Virginia, where there are a lot of data centers, some of these are getting to be really close to homes. And with the noise, the pollution, lights, I'm sure that those homes are affected. I'm not aware of any situation in Iowa where they are that close at this point.
We have one comment in the chat about the materials being made available, and we will definitely be sharing a follow-up email. I can share too, we have sort of a best practices guide that Sierra Club put out last year and has since updated. It's called Demanding Better. And it's all about energy practices and data centers. So I can share that in the chat now, and then we'll have some other more Iowa-specific resources that we will be following up with via email. And this will also be hosted on our Facebook page and I think on YouTube as well for folks to rewatch and see the slides.
Now, I just got a private instant message, and someone wrote and said, I drove by a data center south of Des Moines. It was so loud. There was a house right across the street, and I imagine that drastically drops the value. And that's a good point.
Yeah.
In
I'm seeing one other question pop up too. Are most of the planned data centers we're seeing going to use grid power, or are they co-localizing energy generation with consumption?
So most of them currently use grid power. We are aware of 6 data centers that are planned near Palo that are planning to use almost all of the output for the Duane Arnold Nuclear Power Plant, and that is looking at restarting. And so that is a huge load that's being taken care of specifically by specific generation. And I think it's going to vary. We certainly think that putting solar panels on the roofs of the data centers, having their own battery backup is a good solution. And we think that's a good alternative to pulling power off of the grid and especially coal or gas-fired power plants.
Yeah, I don't see any reason any of these data centers shouldn't have solar on all of their rooftops. Big flat expanses, perfect for solar. What sort of local scrutiny do these data centers have to undergo before construction? And what do the owners do to sell these structures to local governments?
So data centers are subjected to local zoning and local zoning requirements, and that varies county to county. So they'll have to go through some scrutiny in terms of setbacks and things like that. There isn't a lot of requirement there's no requirement at the state level for citing these. What do the owners do to sell the structures? That's an interesting question. They all talk about construction jobs, which are important. They talk about jobs afterwards. In fact, some of them would have quite a few jobs, in the teens or 20s of employees. So they sell that as economic development. They sell it as immediate access to services that are provided. So quick turnaround when you're doing your searches and things like that. Those are the main things that I've heard.
There's also quick plug for if you need a laugh on this because it's a tough subject. There's a comedian, Charlie Berens, who I shared on our Facebook page, who actually he's very funny, but also has a very real approach to how data centers are sweeping across the Midwest. Sort of addresses some of those concerns and questions. One other question is, do you know of any examples in Iowa or around the country of data centers not proceeding with construction after infrastructure is constructed?
I can't give you specifics. I have heard of cases where they've decided not to build for one reason or another. And I don't know how much it is happening, but our national office does some studying on this, and their belief is that there are way more data centers being proposed than we possibly need or can even support with electricity. So I think there's going to be we know some data centers are being proposed by companies that are not actually providing the service. So they're being built and then pitched, hoping that people will buy into them. So that's what I'm calling by speculation.
Thanks for clarifying that, Pam. So then to kind of dive deeper into employment on this, do we know how much short-term and long-term employment is associated with data center construction and operation?
So there are large numbers of construction jobs to build a data center. Afterwards, there aren't that many jobs that are long-term. There are people that have to maintain the servers and make sure things are working well. And so there are people that provide those jobs. It's usually not a lot of people, but it'll vary from data center to data center. But the main benefit in terms of jobs is the construction job.
Okay, we have a big one here. Why Iowa? Is it because of our relatively cheap power and water, the lack of pushback, lots of land?
Yes.
And it's not just Iowa, we should say. It's a lot of the Midwest, but it is. I'll let you take it, Pam.
These are being built across the country. The state of Virginia has more than anybody else, and they were early targets for data centers. But we're hearing them coming into Wisconsin, they're coming into Minnesota, Illinois, and not just the Midwest. This is a phenomena that is spread across the country. You'll see a lot of large data centers built near large cities because of the quick access and quick turnaround in terms of like Google searches and the like. But they are also being built in rural areas where they don't need a lot of quick access to customers. And so any area of the country is likely to be a target for a data center.
The comedian I mentioned earlier is actually from Wisconsin, so I dropped a link to his videos in there. And I will also share our Demanding Better report in the chat for those of you who can see that. Okay, any other questions?
There is something that came in the chat that said in Madison County, they thought property values went down if they were near data centers. So I think early we're seeing some effect on property values.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if there's no more questions. Oh, there we go. Is there a strong sentiment among data center developers that switching to air cooling is important to mitigate water use? I haven't heard.
I have
Pam?
not heard anything. I will say that when Google came into Lynn County, they are concerned about the water and actually is helping the Lynn County supervisors pay for some studies of the water quantity and what's available for data centers to use, the Google data centers to use in Lynn County. So I think the data centers are aware of it. I think that there is some concern and clearly they need a lot of water and they need, just as they need a lot of electricity. So I suspect they're aware of it.
Yes, and they certainly have the money to be doing those studies. So that's good that they, least they could do over in Lynn County. Are there any Iowa legislators showing concern or inclination of limiting the construction of data centers?
So we presented this same webinar yesterday to legislators. We had a few legislators online, had a great discussion with them wanting to do some work. In fact, they were suggesting even more controls and more responsibilities that needed to be placed on the data centers than we were suggesting. I fully expect that there will be some legislation next session in January. Don't know what it's going to be yet. We're still in discussion with some of the legislators who didn't come to the webinar. So there is a lot of interest among some of the legislators.
Yes, we'll be following up with them as well. Um, how long does it take to get a data center interconnected?
I don't know. It takes a long time to build a data center. The planning and zoning piece doesn't take that long. You know, that's a matter of a few months. So that has to, the permitting that goes in ahead of time. I suspect it takes a little bit to make sure that you've got the interconnections to run them. I believe that there are a couple of gas plants proposed in Iowa that have to be built in order for the data centers to operate. One in Marshalltown. We think there's one going in the Quad Cities. So that takes some lead time. These don't turn over overnight. I mean, it takes some serious planning and placement and buying land and the like. So
And planning and permitting, and then on top of that, the infrastructure. So it's not a quick thing. So hopefully we can get some good boundaries set this legislative session and just better practices for our state. All right. Not seeing any more come through. Double checking Q&A. I think we can wrap up there then. Thank you so much, Pam, for this great presentation. Thank you all for joining. Shout out to Brianna for running slides and Jess for the tech work. Yeah, thank you again all for joining. There will be no Lunch and Learn next week, but there will be the first Friday of January, right? I think it's January 2nd. Brianna will be leading that. And yeah, so we'll see you all next year. Happy holidays.
thank you.
Thanks, everyone.